good brands create moments, but it's the great brands that create movements.
Greg Hoffman.
Greg Hoffman.
Greg Hoffman.
Greg Hoffman.
Today I am speaking with Greg Hoffman, who rose from logo design intern to CMO at a small Oregon footwear company called Nike. I think they sell shoes. Now a global brand leader, creative visionary, and author, Greg oversaw Nike's famous brand marketing at a critical time in its history, including the rise of a more politically active brand than would have been possible just a couple of decades ago. Nike, according to Greg, is all about the emotional connection. Literally and figuratively, putting yourself in your customer's shoes. And by design, rediscovering the human element to unlock brand creativity and form stronger brand-to-consumer bonds. That's why it's no surprise that Greg's book on the topic is called Emotion by Design. Welcome to Top CMO. And we're talking about emotion by design. And I love how you start out your book. It's the scene is you've had this amazing career at Nike. You're reflecting on how your tenure there has gone full circle. And I actually want to start at the beginning because you reach the highest levels of Nike, but you actually start in a really unusual way. You start as a logo designer. So talk about maybe humble beginnings and how does working on logos as a designer eventually inform your career as it develops and you start to understand the mechanics of how emotion works in marketing.
Sure. Well, thanks for the invitation today, Ben. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And yes, I started Nike as a graphic design intern, right? And at that time, I had not really explored a career in marketing, and I had not really gone beyond creating visual communication, and I hadn't explored what it's like to ask the type of questions of how you want people to feel, right, when you engage with them as a brand. And so it wasn't until I got to Nike that I started to be around teammates and a team culture that really looked at their relationship with consumers, right, and not just transactions. And so coming in, and my first projects were designing logos. And if you think about it, you have to tell an entire story about a brand or an athlete or a product within a brand mark that oftentimes is no bigger than, a quarter, right? So there's a lot that has to go in that. So in some ways you are revealing the story of the brand through what I like to call a visual signature, or a brand mark is the punctuation for your message, right? And what you put out in the world. So that's where I started. But being part of this company that resonated so deeply and so emotionally with consumers and audiences of all types, I started to go on this journey of really thinking about the total experience that people have with a brand at all touch points. And over the years, that's when I started to expand my own responsibilities to include things like brand communication and social media marketing and event and retail marketing, you name it. And ultimately, yes, that led me to the role of Chief Marketing Officer.
Well, and so how do you, when you think about your journey at all these levels and you think about the role that emotion played, you started at Nike, you weren't planning that you would be, emotion would be a tool of your marketing. You're exposed to a lot of, talented people, great marketers. At what point did you start to realize that emotion is the currency by which we play? I mean, I imagine me, I did some internships. I wouldn't have a clue about that then. At what part did you start to say this becomes, I have a big toolkit. I'm at Nike. I have a lot of resources. I have celebrity athletes. I have really creative teams and people, but actually emotion is one of the biggest tools I have as I do my job.
That's right. And, little did I know as a teenager, subconsciously, I guess I knew because just like my first pair of Nike sneakers were the Air Force One, right? And they gave me a level of confidence on the court, right? Beyond my skill level. And certainly the communication the classic and iconic advertising that I came across as a teenager really stirred my emotions and certainly gave me more belief as a brand. But it was the aha moments were really this, is that I was part of work in those early years where the team was asking the question of, what's our invitation, right? What is the movement we are inviting the audience to be a part of, right? And that's where I started to understand this idea of good brands create moments, but it's the great brands that create movements. And that's the spirit of Just Do It, of course. Just Do It transcends just being a slogan, right? It's a state of mind and a way of life for millions around the world. And it needs no translation. So it was really in those early years and being part of those conversations and seeing how this brand lived this idea of serving versus selling, if you will. And like that ultimately is the role when you're trying to serve your audience, then you're going to try to know them in the deepest way possible, which will ultimately, I believe, lead to a strong longer term relationship.
Well, so our version of kind of putting the audience first, we would call it you first rather than me first, meaning we need to serve you first, and then we earn the right to have our message right along with it if we serve you first. Now it's also very in vogue to say our audience, or in this case the consumer, is the hero of the story, right? Our job is to make them their own hero. And I think you see that in a lot of sort of iconic Nike ads, which we'll go through, where it's celebrating the hero, and that hero could be LeBron James or Tiger Woods, or that hero can be the, you know, in one of the ads, kind of the kid who's out there in the middle of nowhere running along and trying to be great. So how does that play in this notion of, you're talking about service to others, but also who's the hero, who's the center, who's the protagonist, and how you've thought about that in terms of creating emotion in that connection?
Well, it's a great question. And part of my role and everyone's role during those years was to broaden the definition of sport and broaden the definition of what it means to be an athlete, and really instill this idea that, you know, greatness isn't a birthright. It's not just for the chosen few or the elite athletes that you see on TV. Our role was to instill this idea that everybody has this potential, not only as an athlete but as a human being. And when you get into the business of helping people reach their full potential as athletes, it's quite powerful. And of course, that's a pretty big marketplace. And you know, so your point about putting the audience or the customer at the center of this hero's journey, if you will, is part of that. But you have to make sure that your message and the stories that you're exploring and communicating, that they are relatable. Even if they feature the greatest athletes on earth competing at the highest level, like at the Olympics or the World Cup, the way you express that and reveal that truth, if you will, of the athlete experience, you know, we have to see ourselves in that. And if I can tell you this, is like in college, even before I knew I had the Nike internship, I had a Michael Jordan poster on my wall, and it was called Wings. And underneath that poster was this quote that said, "No bird can soar too high if he soars with his own wings." And the point is that I can't relate to Michael Jordan jumping from the free throw line and dunking, but I can relate to this idea of taking risks and using what I have to soar higher. And so I think that, you know, all those years ago was a clue to some of the experiences I would get to be a part of, you know, over the next almost 3 decades.
No bird soars too high if he soars with his own wing.
The ad agencies or marketing agencies that's pitching Nike, and they're coming in, hey, we've got this campaign hot off the press. We got some time in front of Greg Hoffman. They know you care about emotion, and they're going to show you this new campaign they have. what is the lens that you evaluate that? Do you have a checklist in your mind of what you're watching? And I assume if it's at Nike's level, it probably looks pretty great. There's probably some, moving music with it that kind of stirs you up, and you feel good. I think it's not uncommon to shed a tear during a Nike, a sort of iconic Nike ad. But what are you going through your mind to know, like, okay, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to say, versus this is, another nice looking ad that doesn't do that?
Well, first and foremost, certainly for your audience to understand is that the best communication, the outcome is only as good as the insight or truth that you reveal in the beginning of the process, okay? And, that whole idea of empathy, if you will, is really important here, because you need to peel back the layers and get beyond, the obvious assumptions and observations to find a deeper truth that you want to reveal in a creative way. It's really difficult if you're just looking at a blank sheet of paper as a creative team, but you have no strong insights to go on. Quite frankly, you'll probably create something that may look great, but it doesn't reveal anything else about the human condition beyond what you already know. So the iconic communication over the years from all brands, to me, really starts with the team understanding that and digging deep. So I would always, really start there and have a strong understanding before an idea goes all the way into production. Right. And then part two is, okay, so you have the insight or truth you want to reveal, but how do you make it distinct and reveal it in this visceral way? And that's where I think curiosity plays such a big role in the creative process, because you need teams kind of, looking outside into the world of entertainment and technology and nature and all the different experiences that we have, and pulling those points of inspiration in to the process to create something amazing. Because if you're in your own cocoon, right, and you're not being curious about what's happening in the world, the spirit of the times, what are people responding to, and what's on the cutting edge, it's going to be in turn hard for you to be someone who starts trends or to be a trendsetter.
So what does Nike actually sell? Greg and his team would explore each facet of the human condition and try to find a compelling message buried deep within to help them create the evergreen ads we can all recall today. Good brands create moments. Great brands create movements.
Out of that protest by Colin Kaepernick, 49ers quarterback knelt instead of standing during the national anthem at last night's game. He was not,
or at least jump on board them. In 2016, Colin Kaepernick became famous for not scoring the game-winning touchdown at the Super Bowl, but for kneeling during the pre-game rendition of the national anthem.
Cops that are murdering people. We have cops in the SFPD that are blatantly racist, and those issues need to be addressed.
And so began a debate about patriotism and injustice. So what was Greg's thought process during that period and for that campaign in terms of the emotional connection and reflecting the times?
Yeah, great question. And, it's interesting. You started this conversation with, I think the beginning of my book and the retirement party. And I was presented a very big portrait, black and white portrait shot by the great photographer Platon of Colin Kaepernick, right? And that was a very emotional moment for me because, I had a deep respect for Colin's sacrifice and, just being a part of the team that brought that message to the world. And if you go back to 2017, when Colin didn't have a team to play for, that summer of 2017, even though he was shortly removed from just being part of that Super Bowl team, right? Sitting at a small, intimate lunch with Colin as we talked about the best way to amplify his voice and support that cause, it was very personal to me because Colin and I share similarities, not certainly as athletes, but in our upbringings, in that we're both biracial. We're both half black and half white. We're both adopted by our white parents and grew up in, a predominantly white school system. So those are the eyes I looked through as chief marketing officer that summer, sitting next to Colin, thinking about how best we could move forward. And the second thing I want to say, and so that's that role of, again, empathy and being able to realize someone else's kind of experience. The second thing I want to say is I'm and the team is standing on the shoulders of all the work that had come before us that had addressed racial injustice in the world, right? And there's iconic work and campaigns that I illustrate in the book. So you're not alone in that pursuit. And you also have a very diverse team in the room, right? Which is why there was no hesitation, I think, because we had the ability to make objective decisions working as a team, making sure that whatever we said always came through the lens of sport, right? Because I think that's important. When brands want to use their platform and position to take a stand on a particular social issue or a pressing cause of the time, they have to make sure they can connect what they sell with what they believe the world needs in that time, and that their audience can also understand that. And so that was the work to be done. And of course, a year later, out comes, to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Just Do It is the Crazy Dreams campaign, obviously featuring everyone from Colin Kaepernick to Serena to LeBron James. And it had an incredible resonance with so many types of people around the world. And I think, obviously, over the last 3 years, it's proven just how important that work is and was to not only inspire people and make them feel, but also inspire action, right?
Sure, and take me through. We have a lot of CMOs in our audience, and they might want to say okay, well, I get how Nike connects with emotion, right? That's at the corner of the brand. We're maybe I'm a B2B CMO, right? We don't have these. We're not doing these iconic, with celebrity athlete campaigns. Maybe someone else listening is we're a startup. We're fast growing, but we're not taking out TV spots. Maybe we're doing some YouTube pre-roll. We're doing a little bit of digital here. What would you say to them? And I want to go back to that specific ad. But what would you say to them for how can you pull and make emotional connection, even if you're, doing marketing for enterprise ad tech to a business audience, but you want to incorporate this in your everyday marketing? Because I know you try to make this not for the Nikes of the world, just the Nikes, but everyone else.
Great question. I think whether you're B2B or B2C or a small or large brand, you should be striving to make sure that for your client or your audience, that it feels like there is a human being on the other end of the relationship and not a machine. Very hard to do these days, right? We're definitely in the age of automation within this digital arena. So one of the things I talk about that, quite frankly, requires no money is to make sure you sit down and spend the time to articulate your brand personality, right? If your company, I don't care if you own a hardware store or a small tech startup, if you are a human being, or in Nike's case, an athlete, what are the traits and characteristics and values that compose who you are, right? So that's one. Two, the one thing you have control over, whether it's through your website or social media or even how your staff serves the audience, whether it's through bricks and mortar or a call center, is your written voice, right, is something that should carry that personality of your brand. That should come through, right, even all the way down to your product descriptions, versus it's just generic or it lacks distinction. So I think you have to spend the time first and foremost to define who you are as a brand. And I always say there's three non-negotiables, in my opinion, regardless if it's a startup or an established brand, in terms of, I believe, bodies of work that you have to create. One is your brand house. Your brand house is articulating what your belief and purpose is, what your mission and vision, right? Where are you going and how are you going to get there? And finally, what are your values? So that's body of work one. The second is your brand identity, starting where we started this conversation. The name of your brand, your logo, your brand colors, your typeface, the image that you're trying to create of your brand. And then finally, it really is the soul of your brand, which is articulating your brand personality. If you spend the time, right, as a team, really drafting these documents that are the North Star, right, or in some ways the lighthouse that's guiding you, you're going to have a better opportunity to express human characteristics. And when you do that, I believe you become more personal as a brand, and quite frankly, it plays a strong role in developing your internal culture as well.
So take me through it for Nike. People, I think, have an intrinsic sense of the feel of Nike, but what is the brand house of Nike? What is the brand identity of Nike? What is the personality of Nike that makes it not Adidas, not Under Armour, not other competitors that want to take Nike's position? And I have a sense for this because I grew up in Eugene, which is kind of the birthplace of Nike. Lived near the University of Oregon. I lived in Portland for many years, and Portland, even for people who don't know, I mean, Nike's the dominant company in Oregon, but there's a reason why Adidas USA also has their U.S. headquarters in Portland, because there's a lot of crossover of people, employees, everything like that as well. So what is the context of Nike that makes it Nike and not anyone else?
Sure, and this is well communicated out in the world, but Nike, the fact that you walk through the door every day as an employee, and every single person is crystal clear on Nike's mission statement, which is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And the word athlete has an asterisk on it. That's because the asterisk means that if you have a body, you're an athlete. So it's all of us. So that's very democratic. Again, it's the spirit of Just Do It. So imagine the power of thousands of employees being crystal clear on that, and that your higher pursuit is to serve all athletes. And when I talked about, where are you going and how are you going to get there, how you get there is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete, right? And so from a brand personality standpoint, what you're trying to articulate is the characteristics and values of being an innovator, of a person that's very curious and always is willing to learn to get better, right? And someone who is committed to focusing on all the details, no matter how small, and someone that is incredibly collaborative when I think of the Nike brand. And so your role when it comes to being a marketer and communicating is to make sure that you're expressing different traits and characteristics at different times in the relationship that you have with your audience. Because here's, for the folks listening, I think it's really important. If you speak the same way every day, you might become boring or annoying, right? Because human beings aren't just one characteristics, and they don't just use one tone of voice. So your personality is a mosaic, and I think over time the consumer has to feel those different those different characteristics come through. So, because a lot of what I'm talking about, Ben, is being relatable and feeling a bit more human as a brand, right? Even if it is business to business, I think those nuances and subtleties over time will really contribute to the brand equity, especially the emotional equity that you build in your brand and how your audience feels about you. The last thing I would say, on this subject, because I think this is really this can be quite empowering for any team, right? And I'm not just talking marketers or creatives. I think the brands that go beyond just asking the question of how they want their audience to feel about the brand through each interaction, right? Of course, that's 101 of branding, is creating an impression in your audience's mind of your brand and your products. Check, But it's the great brands go beyond that and ask the question, how do we want people to feel about themselves and their ability to achieve their aspirations when they interact with us? And those are empowerment brands, brands that build confidence in the businesses and consumers that they work with and interact with. So ask those questions, and I think, you'll start to uncover new opportunities to have deeper relationships that are more meaningful with your audience that go beyond a series of transactions.
Empathy, a noun. The ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Empathy plays such a big part in Greg's Nike campaigns and creative decision-making as a whole. Whether you are a large Fortune 500 company or a disruptive startup, you should be striving to make sure your audience feels like there is a human being on the other end of the relationship. A human who understands your audience's values, beliefs, and characteristics. In fact, the notion that all of us, even our superheroes, are all too human was the insight behind an ad featuring Michael Jordan.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
Okay, so take me through this one in terms of relatability, approachability. There's a lot of Michael Jordan Nike ads where he's probably, dunking and taking off from the free throw line and all of that. So how does this relate to the audience, the emotion? Why is this an effective ad?
Right. Well, and thanks for showing my favorite ad of all time, by the way. One I wasn't part of, but I just think it shows all of the best characteristics of great storytelling, right? Starting with what I talked about earlier, the fact that a team from the Wieden & Kennedy Creative Agency spent the time with Michael to learn that he missed 9,000 shots, right? That they spent the time to learn that 26 times he was asked to take the game-winning shot and he missed. So again, you can't have the iconic ad until you've spent the time to uncover those truths. And it's pretty amazing, back to Michael, that he was willing to reveal that, right? Lost over 300 games. And so that's where that team started, right? And then they revealed it in a very soulful way in terms of how that was shot and using the voice of the GOAT, right? Greatest basketball player of all time, right? In some circles, certainly. And so what happens there? Well, right away, it causes you to reflect on your own life, whether it's personal or professional, and ask yourself the question, are you willing to take the risk, to take the shot when things are on the line? And to me, I think everybody can relate to that idea of success from failure, right? And so why I like that spot is it really it really uncovers a truth that's oftentimes hidden, and but when it's revealed by someone of his stature, it unlocks I believe the potential in a really broad audience for them to kind of step forward. Maybe the following day they took more risks. And maybe there's company cultures that weren't so afraid of failure and allowed more experimentation and invention within their workplace, even if it never made it to market. And as someone who ran a variety of different brand innovation teams, a lot of the work we created, Ben, we knew would never make it to the consumer. But we also knew that a lot of, that's the price of innovation. Oftentimes, failure leads to success down the road, right? And I think it's really hard to create something that is truly defies the status quo by getting it right on the first try.
Have you, in your career, not a lot of folks maybe have risen at a major, Fortune 500 company from Intern all the way to CMO and the leader of large numbers of teams and thousands of people. Before we hit your successes, which there's a lot, what's your Michael Jordan ad? Meaning, if they were going to make the Greg Hoffman version of that, what were the misses, the failures, the mistakes that paved the way for success? Are there any that you think of that didn't quite hit that one right, but it propelled me forward in your story?
Well, it was more about the fact that so much of my early career was me figuratively speaking through my hands, because I was a designer. So I was creating my work and letting the work speak for itself, right? And so it's, I'm a lifelong introvert. So finding my leadership voice, there were many starts and stops, right? Because I was in a very kind of personal pursuit as those early days of designing stores and posters and logos and world building, right? And on that and launching innovations. And so I was basically, keep in mind that one day I'm an intern, and then 7 years later, I'm responsible and leading the very team I was interning for. So you could imagine the learning curve there, maybe a little bit of the cynicism I had to deal with as well. So it was really trial by fire. And that's what I mean by Nike and brands like them taking risks on their people, stretching people into positions, maybe even if they're not ready. And so I was allowed to really find my leadership voice, refine my leadership style over those years of, as my scope of responsibility grew, and I had to lead through not just my actions but through my words more and more. So that's really, I could have just said, you know what, I'm not up for this. I like the safety of just the drafting table, if you will, or my Mac computer, and I just want to geek out on those designs. But I'm just a big believer that, and I've said this before, right? I mean, complacency is not only the enemy of creativity, it also prevents you from realizing your potential as a leader. And you have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, right? You got to leave the safety net. Otherwise, you'll never know if you can make that shot. So that's just a little, it was again, go for it, Ben.
No, I was just going to say, it almost sounds like for your career, it almost sounds like the message of a Nike ad, right? Of a great one, right? Of the willingness to take the shot, the willingness to try to be great, the willingness to go beyond and do something that you haven't done before and extend it. It seems like you approached your career at Nike very much with the voice and the identity of Nike, which speaks a lot for the company. If the team is embodying the values of the company, even in their own personal trajectory.
That's right. It takes a willingness to take the risk, and it takes a willingness for the company and the company culture to put you in those championship situations, if you will, right? I do think there's a lot of that brands large and small can take from that. I can't say this enough because it's easy. We are certainly coming out of the pandemic in this world of optimization and efficiency, and rightly so, right? It's been a rough ride for a couple years here, but I guess where I'm going is within a team culture, those traits of risk-taking, curiosity, and empathy are just so important, right? To achieve, I think, exceptional results as a brand and as a business.
So the moment with really career-defining moment, call it a Colin Kaepernick campaign, but what's interesting about it, and to go back to that ad, is a lot of the creative for it, he's sort of present in it, but it features a whole lot of other people. It's not just like, here's our Colin Kaepernick spot. There are some things like that, but kind of the most famous ad, I want to play it for you, and I'm going to kind of keep the sound off because you obviously know the ad well. And take me through, as you watch this, what's going on here. Like, we open, for instance, with a skateboarder. Then we see, and let me just, rather than narrate the whole thing, let me just show it to you here, if you can see this again. And explain to me as I play this what the thought process was, because we don't yet know that Colin Kaepernick is in this ad. So what's happening now?
Well, again, this is a celebration of Just Do It, and Just Do It is the democracy of sport, if you will. And that, again, as I said before, that we all have it in us to achieve our definition of greatness, whether it's on the court, on the track, the field, you name it. And it's illustrating this through athletes at the professional and Olympic level, all the way to athletes like your next door neighbor, right? And it's showing how powerful the unifying power of sport is, right? And just, I think the bigger thing here is that we do a lot of dreaming as children, right? And we dare to dream, if you will. You know this, right? You're on the court as a kid and you're emulating your favorite athletes, and you really do believe as you're growing up that you can achieve anything. And then maybe you stop dreaming as much as you get older, right? And there's a lot of other dimensions to your life that maybe take away that time to play and dream. And so really, this ultimately is a story about dreaming bigger. That's it, right? And remembering that you don't have to ask permission to dream big, right? And I would say this, that goes for a company culture. The minute you have to ask permission to use your imagination and dream big is the day you stop becoming a brand, I believe, of inspiration and innovation.
So what is your thought on, let me give you another company that connects with emotion, that has iconic ads. And when I saw that, that spot and saw, everyone dreaming big, it kind of reminded me of the ad. And that company is Apple. And if you know the ad spot they have one called, Here's to the Crazy Ones. And you see images of, now they're not an athlete-based company. So they're showing Albert Einstein and Gandhi and other people who are rule breakers and people who defied convention and had a bigger vision. You watch that ad, you also, at least me, I feel something watching that, right? You feel like you can do everything. So how do you view, when you sort of take it out of the lens of Nike, seeing emotion used by, say, a company like Apple also makes iconic ads that are remembered? What is your opinion of them and a creative like that?
Now you're naming, my second favorite ad of all time. So You're two for two. I just as you said, I even today when I watch that, I feel so much, and I've said this before. I truly believe that Apple believes that everyone has creative capacity. That every single person on this planet, if given the tools and capabilities, can express themselves in creative ways. And I just see that through what they've brought into the world. And I think here we are a couple decades beyond when that story, that ad launched Think Different, which a lot of that was about defying the status quo and defying convention. And I think, obviously a big message in that moment in time, but you could run that film today, and I believe it would be just as significant and important and timely, right? Because I think we always have to keep reminding us as a society, as humankind, about our individuality, our uniqueness, and that is powerful, both in your personal life and in your professional life. And oftentimes these days, it can get into a game of creating uniformity in your company culture, right? So I take so much from the Think Different campaign, and it gets back to that characteristic as well of being courageous or fearless, right? I think that's one that I think a brand like Apple or Nike have been known for, and it's been a consistent trait within the communication. But again, I'll go back to this idea of moments versus movements, and creating a relationship versus a transaction. And yeah, you're naming brands like Apple and Nike who approach it that way, and look at the relationship as a journey of helping each other progress, right? It gets thrown all around a lot, right? This idea of the best version of yourself, but it's true. Like if you get into that game where you're literally trying to incrementally move people to become the best version of themselves, that's an talk about business growth, right?
So how do you rise all the way from intern to CMO at a company like Nike? Greg credits the company with allowing him the freedom to find his leadership voice and style. Greg's life in marketing, in fact, is something like a Nike ad. In his career, he too asked himself, can I be better? Am I afraid of failure? What do I need to do to win? But if Nike ads are thought of as something close to an art form in itself, how do you balance your business needs? How can you message the human condition with great emotion, but also drive your quarterly sales goals?
No question. And Ben, certainly for any CMO, they're running an offense that has to move in real time at consumer speed, right? And if you're not on time, your audience is going to go somewhere else. So, but everything I talk about on the art dimension of brand building, ultimately to me, the consequence of that is business growth. So what I would say is that a simple mindset one can have in this fast-paced world that we live in, right, is think of your audience as members versus customers. Because if they're members and they're members of your club, then there should be privileges. Privileges, again, as I talked about, that are helping them achieve their aspirations and dreams. It's just a subtle mindset. I'm not talking about a membership program. I'm just mentally, as an individual and as a team, when you think of someone as a member of your team or your club versus a customer, I think you're maybe going to ask some different questions as you're releasing content at the speed of sound, right? And reading and responding to the consumer's desires and the marketplace dynamics. So a lot of what I'm talking about, Ben, is just make sure that you start with a mindset that treats your customer as more than a number. And I know that seems obvious, but easier said than done. But it has to start with a just like your favorite championship teams. You can't get there without that championship mindset. And for me, for a CMO, it's just it's making sure. And the other thing I like to talk about is that stepping back every now and then and just asking, are you making deposits of into the bank of brand equity? Are you making withdrawals? Right? Because I don't think there's no indifference created. It's either positive or negative. So look, because I get this question a lot, right? But so many of the lessons, the point to draw from them are, what are the questions and filters one needs to ask either in a day, in a month, or a quarter, within this, speed of light consumer engagement world that we live in today.
Well, and I want to end on a couple, get your perspective on a couple trends, a couple thoughts, and then one piece of career advice. But just to finish up, and one trend I'd love your take on, because I think you have a unique vantage point on it, is that really the rise of influencer marketing, and influencer being. I'd love your take on it, because you worked with a lot of some of the biggest influencers in the world, right? These sort of iconic athletes. But in the past few years, the rise of influencer marketing means kind of the democratization of who influencers are, right? It could be someone that is not famous to everyone, but is famous to a niche audience. It's someone that has a certain number of social fans or followers. So what is it about, first with celebrity marketing and now with influencer marketing, that provokes emotion, provokes commerce? Why is it important? Why have we seen that sort of democratization of who an influencer is?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I would just start by saying I live by a mantra: don't chase cool. And of course, marketing teams are under incredible pressure, right, to find and sometimes chase the latest individual that has the most influence, or use the latest social media platform or capability that is, seems to be the talk of the day in the media. And so there's this pressure to chase cool, but if you do that, more than likely you won't catch it, and your consumer ultimately is going to know you're faking it. So that's why at the center of all these decisions when it comes to influencer marketing is authenticity. Can you authentically connect it can be the passion or the values or the needs of the ambassador you're collaborating with or not? And if you can't do that, then more than likely it's not an authentic relationship. And that's certainly a filter we always used over the years, right? Whether it's collaborating on product, on storytelling, or an experience, right? So it's not so much about to me, authentic connection is more important than the how high the profile is of the individual, right? Because over time, as I've said before, your authenticity is your cultural currency. And if you lose that, then in the end, you're not going to have the type of status and influence in culture that you could have had if you were more diligent in the relationships you created. So bottom line is asking those questions in the beginning as you're exploring who you want to work with, whether it's a YouTube star, a high-level celebrity, or just someone who's on the verge of becoming, highly notable. Trying to find the authentic shared passion that you might have, right? Do they love your product, or did they love your brand growing up? Or, what is that versus it's just, it's just a transaction, because as I said, transactions with your consumer are just as bad as transactions with your ambassadors.
Well, and one other kind of final trend I'd love your take on is this notion of companies taking a more political stand, doing something that takes an issue. And we had, a lot of those come with socioeconomic changes, Black Lives Matter, and I think in Nike's history, you have this juxtaposition where you have an ad featuring Colin Kaepernick, which definitely has a political point of view and a point of view around social injustice. But you also have in the history, even iconic athletes like Michael Jordan has a famous quote, like, "Republicans buy sneakers too," which he didn't want to polarize people. So what do you think about this trend now of companies taking more of a stand and also facing backlash for it? Disney's a famous example right now, with people being upset about Disney's stand on issues and in Florida, and that impacting even their tax status in Florida. How do you relate all that to that trend, and what brands should do now to navigate all of this?
Yeah, well, I do believe we're in a time where you can create strong business growth and brand strength, but also help create a better and more inclusive world. I truly believe that. And I don't believe it's a time where indifference is really an option. Certainly with your employees, because your employees are living with the news and the images that they're seeing every day. So first and foremost, you have an obligation to address these issues with your team. Again, that gets down to that trait of empathetic leadership. Secondly, you have to make sure your own house is in order. And what I mean is that everyone is crystal clear on your team or your leadership team back to what is your mission and vision, and what do you bring to the world, and what's your promise to your audience. And that's totally clear as you step up to use your voice or platform to try to create action to address one of the pressing issues of the day. If you're unclear, right, on your purpose, then it could be a distraction to your business if you explore getting involved in a cause. And so that's that's one. And then two, you have to make sure, I think, we're using storytelling, but storytelling shouldn't be the default medium of engaging in a lot of these causes. There's so many other ways that you're seeing brands and companies kind of try to create positive change in the world through a variety of methods. But it starts by making sure that, as I said before, that you and your audience can connect what you sell to what you believe the world needs in that moment. And if it's confusing, then it might not be the best time for you to engage on that.
Here's one thing I always found fascinating about Nike's iconic tagline, "Just do it." It's not just win it. It's not celebrate victory. It's actually in the doing, in the trying, being there in the trenches, being up at 5 a.m. on a random Wednesday morning where it's pouring out rain and you're the one running when you'd rather be home in bed. There's emotion in that. There's emotion by design.
If you want to succeed in business, if you want to succeed in marketing, if you want to succeed in your career, and you're an introvert, what do you need to do? What do you need to do? What did you do to succeed? When sometimes people talk about the business place, the workplace is geared towards extroverts. Agree, disagree, and what did you do?
Yeah, certainly maybe the traditional organization oftentimes left out, you could say, the back to that Think Different campaign. It kind of left out the daydreamers, the quiet voices, right? And quite frankly, the underrepresented diverse groups. Okay, so now thankfully we're in a moment in time where that is being addressed, and brands are more aware and more committed to having greater representation around that. And that's why in the book, I do not only talk about, obviously, representation in terms of race, but also in terms of style of leadership and on that. And, as I say, just because you have the loudest voice doesn't mean you're right. You might just be loud. So, so for me, and speaking maybe to those introverts out there, I think you do have to. It does come down to risk taking, and the more you put yourself out there, the more comfortable you become. And I think you really, back to what I was talking about the brand personality and the characteristics, you need to write down what you want to be famous for, and what are your mantras, and what do you believe, and have that start to guide the way you convey your direction and on that, and before you know it, it will really become second nature, over the years, to go from someone who was looked at as someone just, oh, that's the creative guy. Well, you could either just stay in that one-dimensional silo, or you can address it. But you have to, I think, again, figuratively or literally, write down what you want to be known for. So when you're not in the room and your name goes up on the wall, you close the distance between what you believe and what those who live with your leadership believe. Does that make sense?
It does. If I was going to paraphrase what you said, just as important as the brand you create for the company, what does your personal brand say? What are you leaving with people that lasts, that builds? And we have to be brand builders at the macro level and also brand builders at the micro level. And to build your brand, you have to know what you stand for, because how are you going to build it otherwise?
Well said, Ben. We spend so much time on the brands we serve, but very little of the brand of you, like, us. And that's why, that I do take people, the teams that I led, and also, I'm the branding instructor at the University of Oregon's Graduate School of Business, and I take them through the exercise of not only creating, the brand house and the brand characteristics of this product or service they want to bring to the world, but of themselves as well. Because ultimately, if you get into that practice and refine it over the years, you will achieve the best version of yourself as a leader.
Well, and you did one more. You even took it to the next level, because your advice is, which is great advice, which is write down what you stand for and what you want your brand to be. You went a step further and, of course, wrote Emotion by Design and wrote a whole book by it.
There you go.
And the final thing I want to end on is from the book, 3 of your favorite guiding principles, which you've identified as things that you stand for. And one of them is that creativity is a team sport. 2 is dare to be remembered. And 3 is leave a legacy, not just a memory. To wrap up, why are those your guiding principles? And why does that represent principles that our audience should take away and implement in their next marketing campaign for their company, but also just in their life?
Yeah, well, it all, great question. And it is both professional and personal. And to create those type of deep emotional bonds between a brand and an audience or product and people, you need to support and lean into and celebrate the creative practices in your business that are oftentimes responsible for those emotional connections. And so that's why when I say creativity is a team sport, it takes everyone in the company, right and left brain thinkers, the people on the data and analytics side and the people on maybe the brand marketing and design side and the innovation side, working together. And I have a lot of different analogies that I lay out in the book about how you can create better chemistry, better and radically collaborate as a team, but that everybody plays a role in that, not just people who are great artists, okay? That's such an ancient definition. So we all have a role to play in that process, and so that's creativity as a team sport. Dare to be remembered is creating stories and experiences that will never be forgotten. Well, why are they not forgotten? Because you've touched people deep inside them, right? And you've stirred their emotions in ways. And so I lay out ways you can achieve that. And then finally leave a legacy, not just a memory, right? And I'll say it again, good brands create moments, great brands create movement. So, but what I really get into in the book is using your position and platform as a brand and as an individual leader, not just to of course, drive great business growth and brand awareness, but also take the opportunity that you have to close the distance between those that have privilege and those individuals and communities that are underserved that maybe don't have access and opportunity for what you bring into the world, for your products and your services. So I think we're in a moment in time where the brands that are also looking to break down those barriers are the brands that are leaving a legacy. And so my message to everybody is leave your legacy that will never be forgotten.
According to Greg Hoffman, the key is to think deeply and emotionally about the total experience people have with your brand at all touch points. Be open and curious as to what's happening in the world and utilize empathy to better understand your audience. Don't shut down ideas. Hear people on your team out, even the quiet ones, the daydreamers, the introverts. Just because someone's loud doesn't mean they're right. They just might be loud. If your brand wants to connect your product with a particular social issue or cause, that's great. Just make sure you create an authentic relationship and not just a transaction. Creativity is a team sport. Use all members of the team, the number crunchers, the analysts, the designers, the storytellers, even the interns. Everybody has something to offer a great campaign. Dare to be remembered. Great stories and experiences will never be forgotten. So leave a legacy. Good brands create moments. Great brands create movements. So should you embrace emotion by design? 3 words. Just do it. For Top CMO, I'm Ben Kaplan.